Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Karwaan Heritage Exploration Beyond the Myth workshop. Today, we are here for our guest lecture series, and it's our privilege to welcome today's guest lecturer, Professor P. Ajithprasad, a distinguished archaeologist whose work has shaped our understanding of South Asia's deep past from the Stone Age to the rise of early urban societies. Professor Ajit Prasad joined the Department of Archaeology and Ancient History at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda in 1990s and served there with a distinction until his retirement as professor in 2021. For over 3 decades, he taught and mentored generation of students in subjects like prehistory, bioanthropology, and South Asian archaeology. Currently, a guest professor at the Archaeological Science Center at IIT Gandhinagar, his research has consistently explored questions of cultural evolution and human adaptation during the Quaternary period. He has made major contribution to our understanding of Stone Age prehistory in Gujarat, playing a key role in the discovery of several Acheulian and other Paleolithic sites in primary context. Since the 1980s, he has also been deeply involved in Harappan archaeology, particularly in Gujarat, Kutch, and Saurashtra excavation projects as a part of MS University excavation project. His crucial work illuminated the crucial transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agro-pastoral communities and has helped us better understand the beginnings of early Harappan life in Western India. Today's Professor Ajit Prasad continues to pursue research on the Paleolithic and Harappan phases in Gujarat and Western India, bringing together bringing together decades of field experience and scholarly insight to the study of early human lifeways and cultural transition. So please join me in welcoming Professor Ajit Prasad. So on behalf of Team Karwan, I welcome you, sir. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you. Shall I start?
So you can.
Yeah. That introduction. Before a presentation on presentation, for inviting, I actually do only Shan Sharma through communication. For inviting me for this presentation today. Oh, no, it's not moving. Okay, yeah, it's moving. Fine. Is the slide moving?
No, sir.
Can you hear?
I'm not.
Is the slide moving?
Sir, I think on my screen we are still on the first slide, South Asian prehistory, early Harappan cultural, and if other participant can see the slides moving, please let me know.
And now I'm on the second slide.
Okay, sir, it's moving. It's moving. Yes.
It's moving. Okay,
Yeah.
so in today's presentation, I will actually focus upon basically the early Harappan and the beginning of Indus civilization. Indian prehistory, especially the Stone Age prehistory in the last 2.5 decades, has actually been going through very exciting times. In this period, we have actually kind of able to take the antiquity of the beginning of Stone Age prehistory, almost 1.5 million years, which is one of the earliest in the world context. Apart from that, we also do have a better understanding about the Stone Age cultural uh, uh, sequence or cultural continuation and transformation from the lower Paleolithic to middle Paleolithic, and then from the middle Paleolithic to later periods to the beginning of food production. These are all possible primarily because of the concerted effort by various researchers, and also by the application of various scientific methods and tools that are available in the last 2.5 decades, and a very rigorous application of new dating techniques. all these have actually helped to kind of put or make the prehistoric Stone Age prehistory research in an exciting sphere. Equally interesting is the Harappan archaeology in the last 2.5 decades. One of the important, contribution or change that actually happened as far as the Indus civilizational studies are concerned, is that people actually started realizing how exactly the Indus civilization actually began, which was actually shrouded into mystery in soon after its discovery in the 1920s. And today we are once again, as far as the chronological position of Indus civilization is concerned, in a better position because of the application of radiometric dates for dating the evidence coming from different parts of the larger Indus cultural domain. Um, my talk today, as I said in the beginning, will be essentially dealing with the early Harappans and the beginning of Indus civilization specifically. I will actually trace the kind of evidence which we have from the Indus Valley and the adjoining regions like the Gagar Saraswati Basin and Gujarat. These are the areas where we actually come across Indus civilization geographically spread into. I hope the slide changed. Yeah. Yeah,
Sorry
this
to sorry to disturb you, sir, but the participants are not able to hear you properly.
they are
So
not
can you check the volume, please?
volume.
Yeah, so
Excuse.
like
Wait a minute.
Sir, could you please try bringing the mic on your earphones closer to your.
I am
Uh,
actually using it.
Hanji,
My
sir.
is
Yes, sir.
it more audible? I mean, better now? Is it better
Uh,
now? Okay, wait a
yes,
minute.
participants, if you could also please send a reaction.
External microphone.
Yes, sir. We are able to hear you now. Thank you.
thank you, sir. It's fine now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, it's fine.
Yes. No. Better? In the beginning of the in 1920 20th century, that is when the excavations at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were actually excavated, which one actually took the antiquity of unfortunately, my slide is not properly moving. I do not know why it is. Is it moving for you? Can I restart the?
Uh,
If there is any
Sir, could you please try resharing your screen?
in
Because
in the slide, please let me know.
I think, sir, we are also not able to hear you because your voice is breaking.
I can't even get out. Breaking. I'll try. Share. Share. Can you see the slide now?
From my screen, I can only see the discovery of Indus civilization. Chani, please let me know.
sir has
Okay.
exited the meeting, Srishti. I'm not able to see anything on my end either.
Okay. So I think sir has exited. He is joining. Let's hope for the good network this time. Yes, correctly. Sir is in the meeting. He's trying.
We can see you, sir.
This trouble with the. I should share now, right?
Yes, sir.
How is it?
Is it fine, sir? We can see the screen.
You can see the screen. Okay.
Yes.
So I was. Is it okay?
Yes, sir. Voice is also
And
fine.
am I audible as well?
Yes, sir.
I'm not using the mic, so. This is what actually kind of shows the discovery of Indus civilization. John Marshall actually announcing the discovery in 1925. With that, the antiquity of civilization in the subcontinent actually went back to almost 2,000 years earlier than what it was actually thought of, to 2,300, 2,500 BC. But the excavations at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa actually did not show the beginning stages of the Indus civilization. It was actually thought there was an abruptness in the emergence of Indus civilization because the antecedent stages of the Indus civilization was not very clear from the excavations at Mohenjo-daro as well as from Harappa. In the 1920s onwards, you actually come across a lot of surveys and explorations carried out throughout the Indus Basin, resulting into the discovery of several Chalcolithic agropastoral village settlements. And many of them actually yielded material remains which are very similar to Indus civilization, but not exactly the same. Um, and this is and then people were actually trying to understand what in fact was the connection between the material remains found from many of these Chalcolithic settlements and in the civilization. One of the persons who actually kind of tried to establish the relationship and the chronological position of all these, what is generally described as the Chalcolithic village farming settlements, was N.G. Majumdar, who was working in the ASI. He kind of carried out an excavation at Amri, as I'll try to show you laser. The Amri is here at this particular site. And he found that all these chalcolithic materials are actually found to be stratified below the Indus material. That led to the conclusion that most of these village farming material remains found throughout the Indus Valley and adjoining regions, especially in Balochistan and the northern part of Pakistan, today's Pakistan, essentially are pre-Harappan in nature. Prior to the, and nothing to do much with the Harappans. They existed prior to the beginning of Indus civilization, because there is no continuity and connection between what has been found at Amri and other Chalcolithic settlements and the Indus sites like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa excavated remains were actually found. And this is what led Stuart Pigott, when he actually wrote a book in the 1950s known as the Prehistory of India. He called all these early Chalcolithic village farming settlements as pre-Harappan. By which he meant was that they were different from the Harappans. So they did not contribute much toward the development of the Indus civilization. That was the concept that prevailed till almost 1960s. Uh, Most probably, it was A. Ghosh, the then Director General of Archaeological Survey of India in the 1950s, first used the term early Harappan. This is after his extensive exploration, which he has conducted in the Gagar Saraswati system in this region, which led to the discovery of Kalibangan and also Sothi, Siswal, and several sites all along the now dried up Gagar Saraswati system. He actually carried out a small little trial excavation, one of the sites known as Sothi, which is adjacent to Kalibangan, and he found that the material culture coming from the Soti are earlier than the Indus civilization, but there are a lot of common features between the Soti assemblage which he excavated in the Gagar Saraswati system and what has been reported from Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. He therefore actually thought that all these early village farming settlements therefore represent the antecedent or the early stages of the Indus civilization. So this is how the concept about the early Harappan being the early stages of Indus civilization actually came into being. And this model was actually kind of adopted and applied in understanding the already known early Chalcolithic or early village farming settlements in the Indus Valley proper. Though all those material remains is reassessed by the archaeologist, and one of those sites at Kodiji was actually excavated in the 1960s by Rafiq Mughal. He could, through his excavation at Kodiji, kind of see a similar kind of continuity from the early stage to a later stage, slowly evolving into the urban phase or the Indus civilization. So that is how the term early Harappan actually became the term for describing the early stages of Indus civilization. Okay, so the pre-Harappan is a term which is no more used today. The term which is used to describe the early stages, all those village farming settlements that actually flourished in different geographical regions of Indus Valley, Middle Indus, the Makran coast, or in the Balochistan region, or the northern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, this one here, and also in the northern Punjab. These are all now described as the early Harappan. By describing the early Harappan, what is actually meant is that there is a continuity starting from the early Harappan, which ending up with the emergence of urban features of the Indus civilization. Why is it not moving? All right. So what you can actually see is if you now look at the material, the material culture as reported from almost there are more than 3,500 sites where that has been reported from the belong to the Indus civilization report from Indus Valley, Gagar Saraswati system, and Gujarat put together. All right. So if you take all the early Harappan sites reported from different regions, one can actually see there is the vast deal of difference between among them actually. Different regions actually reflect different regional features, and this is what actually led to what is known as what is generally described as the regional Chalcolithic assemblages. So you would actually no, I think this is no function. Yeah. So you do actually come across the early Harappan sites which you come across in Mohenjo-daro and or in the Middle Indus, For example, at Amri and Côte d'Iji, you do actually come across certain features which are very common, which is different from the next side, which is next region, which is Balochistan. It has its own kind of material. When I say material culture, what I mean is that most of the times it is actually easily recognizable in the kind of ceramics they actually, the kind of potteries they actually produce. In addition to pottery, there are many other things, but then it is the pottery which actually reflect this regional variation much more easily recognizable. So you have different sets of ceramic assemblages and other material remains found from early Harappan sites in Balochistan, and then you have, and then you actually, if you move further north, that is in the northern part of upper reaches of the Indus Basin, Harappa and surrounding regions, you have material remains which are slightly different from what you come across in the Middle Indus or in Balochistan. So you have, similarly, you have one more region here. This is generally in the Banu Basin. That is in the northern part of that is what we call the northwestern India. The kind of material remains you come across are actually found to be different. I will show you some of the slides to actually illustrate these differences. And then you have in the Makran coast. So you have 5 different major regional early Harappan cultural remains found in the Indus Valley alone. And when you move into the east, come to the Gagar Saraswati system, you have another set of early Harappan cultural remains. And similar different sets of cultural remains are actually found in Gujarat. So, in other words, in throughout the geographical spread of Indus sites, Indus civilization, in the early stages, you actually come across divergent regional cultural remains. All of them actually contributed towards the emergence of what is known as what we actually call the urban ethos of the Indus civilization. During the urban phase, there are certain amount of homogeneity and shared features which we actually see throughout the Indus cultural domain. Whereas in the early phase, you actually come across this regional variation much more visible and easily perceptible. Now, this is the chronological framework within which we actually kind of discuss the early Harappan phase. So what one can see is that the recent studies have actually very firmly kind of demonstrated the early Harappan culture started somewhere around 3600 to 3700 BC and continued up to 2600 BC. So when we talk about the early Harappan, we are actually talking about the time span from 3600 BC to 2600 BC. There are many different terms also being used. So when you actually look into the literature, you actually see different terms actually being used to describe these phases by different archaeologists, different authors. One of the common terms which is used, of course, you have the early Harappan, then you have the Harappan, that is the urban Harappan or the mature Harappan, and the late Harappan. Okay. The other term which is used is the urban Harappan, pre-urban Harappan, and the post-urban Harappan. This is primarily because the moment you say in the civilization, the first thing which we actually the first thing which comes to your mind, in fact, is the urban phase. You know, the Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, all the sealing, etc. So it actually helps you to define the Indus civilization much more confidently. Whereas the early Harappan is much more variant. Anything that existed prior to the urban phase is early Harappan or the pre-urban. And anything actually kind of came up after the decline of the urban phases post-urban. So you do come across different kinds of different terms actually being used in this context. Now, these are some of the different kinds of ceramics which you actually come across in the early Harappan context. What you can actually see is that they are actually coming from different regions, that is in the Middle Indus, or from the Balochistan region, or in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, or from the Makran coast, or from Gujarat, or from the Gagar Saraswati system. what is common in all these things is that most of these were actually handmade pottery. There was no the knowledge of a fast wheel. The use of fast wheel actually comes slightly later, not in the early phases. In the urban phase, it actually started. They started using fast wheel extensively, but in the early Harappan, at least in the early stages, there is no knowledge of fast wheel. So potteries are all made either on a turntable or just modeled. Because of that, because of it, there is certain amount of crudeness in their appearance. And what is important is that each region actually shows their own regional styles in their painting, because pottery actually provided a canvas for the regional sentiments to actually express in their own way. That is what actually helps archaeologists and the historians to understand the variation that exists in different regions as far as the cultural development. And also it helps you to understand the interaction between different regions, because many of these painted decorations and designs are actually found by shared by adjoining regions. This certainly helps an archaeologist to kind of understand the process of cultural development better, um, in many of those regions. So you can actually see this is the kind of ceramics you actually come across from Mehergar, which is one of the earliest site in the subcontinent. It has got a continuity from the Neolithic times onwards. These are the Chalcolithic potteries, early village farming Chalcolithic potteries you come across from Mehergar, which is actually different from just adjoining region, the Kotha Valley in Balochistan. So different kinds of pottery. So when you go a little further up, that is what is. It's also part of Balochistan, but in the Zob and Lorale, these are the two rivers flowing in here. You have a different kind of pottery. When we come to the Middle Indus, you have Amri and Kodiji. You have a totally different kind of pottery. These are all pottery from Amri. A similar kind of variations you actually come across in the Gagar Saraswati system and also from Gujarat. I will quickly go through that. Now, this is one of the early Harappan burials excavated from a site known as Nal. Nal is very close to Amri, somewhere here. This one. Okay. So very few burials, early Harappan burials have actually been found from the Indus Valley. Nal is one of them, very rich burials. You can actually see this is a burial chamber containing skeletons and literally scores of pottery. Because they were intentionally kept in these burials, they are very well preserved. So you have a very good understanding about the kind of pottery, the designs you actually come across in this early Harappan context in the Middle Indus. And then in addition to this pottery, you also have personal ornaments made of steatite, made of lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli is a bluish stone which actually originated from southern part of Afghanistan and reached all the way into the Indus Valley. Once again, kind of indicating the kind of interaction that actually long distance interaction that actually existed even in the early Harappan times. We are actually talking about a period going back to 3600 BC to 2600 BC. So this Nal is actually dated somewhere around 3000 BC. All right. Of course, then you have Mehergar. We'll quickly go through to the slides so that you can actually have an idea about how these variations are actually manifested in pottery. So beautifully painted pottery. In fact, if you look at the early Harappan pottery, is much better painted than much vividly painted, not better painted, much vividly painted than the painting decorations you actually come across in the urban phase of the Indus civilization. In the case of in the urban phase, the kind of painting style you actually come across is very mundane, just parallel lines, and only some potteries were exquisitely painted. Rest of the pottery, almost 90% of the potteries, have very bland decorations like just bands and lines, etc. Whereas in the early Harappan, you can actually see a lot of naturalistic decoration, geometric patterns, in different colors. Sometimes red, sometimes even bluish, sometimes use of white, and different shades of cream or yellow. All these things are actually found in most of this early Harappan settlement. In addition to pottery, another material which actually kind of shows this regional variation is terracotta items. Most of the times, terracotta figurines, animal figurines as well as female figurines. Now, this is the kind of animal figurines, sorry, the female figurines you actually come across from Mehergarh. Starting from the early stages of Chalcolithic occupation at Mehergarh, you actually come across these kind of female figurines, which are essentially different from the female figurines you have come across in the urban phase. Where my cursor moved, this is generally the kind of female terracotta figurines you come across in the urban Harappan context. Whereas this is what you come across in at Mehergarh. As you move towards further north or in the Balochistan region, you actually come across a slightly different one. So every region actually shows their own style in what is known as a terracotta female as well as male figurines are actually found. Okay. In addition to human figures, there are also figures of other animals as well. From Mehergarh, you actually move into the Kata Valley, that is in Balochistan. There are several sites here. You don't have to worry about all those sites. So the sites here in this region, central Balochistan region, is Damsudat, Sordam, and Anjira. Forget about all those things. What you need to understand is that there are several sites, each of them actually showing the regional style of material culture, especially the pottery. And as you move further north here, this is what we call the northern part of Balochistan. You have these two very important sites also show their own style. So there's a bewildering array of variation you come across in the material culture. That is what you need to actually understand. This is the kind of pottery style you actually come across in Balochistan. So the painting style is different, vessel forms are different, and these styles are actually kind of you do come across the style being actually imitated or found in the adjoining regions as well. For example, here this is from Periyanagunde, that is further north of from the Kata Valley. You see the painted bull figurines. So very large painted bull figurines, very very common in this region. In addition to that, you have these mother goddess figurines, which are different from the kind of mother goddess figurines you have actually come across in at Mehergarh or at the Middle Indus region. All right. So move further up into the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region. Here you have this is the Banu Basin. Banu is a river, is a tributary of the Gomal, and then which is actually a tributary of the Indus. So what you can actually see is that the most important site here is Ramanderi, one of the very interesting early Harappan sites dating back to 3200 BC. Where you have and then by the side of it is Harappa here. Okay, for the southeast is Harappa. So this is the kind of pottery you come across, ceramic assemblages you actually come across in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, that is at Raman. There you can see the kind of the painting scheme is different, vessel forms are different, the use of pigments are also different. And the initial stages, you actually come across handmade pottery. In the final stages, you also do come across the wheel-made pottery actually emerging. And this is a feature which we actually come across in all regions. In all regions, the early stages of the early Harappan, you come across only handmade pottery. The final stages before the urban phase actually emerged, fast wheel has actually become popular. Ramandari also has a very interesting distinction that it actually also show the what is known as a planned settlement, a rectangular planned settlement with a fortification. So these are the features with which you actually identify the urban phase of Indus civilization. All urban sites do have is actually protected by a fortification or a periphery wall. That's a common feature you come across in the Indus Indus civilization sites. And that is a trade which actually started in some of the early Harappan sites as well. So that is where you actually see the continuity of many of these traits and tradition from the early Harappan, thereby establishing what is known as the antecedent stages of Indus civilization in these early agropastoral or early Harappan settlements. Eh, if- the Ramanderi also have yielded a lot of seals, not the Harappan seals. Seals actually kind of cut in ivory as well as in bone, but there are no inscriptions. There are animal figurines, figures of some scorpion, those kind of, and then some geometrical patterns actually being engraved on those pieces. So the seal cutting is also generally identified with the urban phase of Indus civilization. But what you can see is that the early stages or the incipient stages of this, the use of seal probably have started in the final stages of the early Harappan itself, as you can see at Ramanderi. Now, Ramanderi also has this totally different kinds of terracotta uh, female figurines. You can actually see many different kinds, and the articulation or the modeling of the body features are all entirely different from what you have already seen from the Kata or the Soab Valley or from Maharaja. So the variation in that. So from the Ramanderi, that is North Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, we move toward the east to Harappa. Harappa, in fact, is located in the northern part of Punjab on the bank of Ravi. This has been actually excavated in the 1980s onwards very extensively, and the early Harappan phase at Harappa, previously unknown, has been very well, because of the excavation, it has been very well illustrated by the material remains which are actually unearthed in the excavation. It shows the early Harappan actually shows the influence from the neighboring region, especially from Ramanderi, that region, as well as from the Middle Indus, the Cottesian or the Amri Cottesian kind of painting styles. And you actually see the influence of Harappa in the Gagar Saraswati system, the early Harappan influence in the Gagar Saraswati system. So none of these early Harappan settlements were actually living in isolation in watertight compartment. They were constantly interacting, and because of this interaction, you come across the common features being shared. So these are some of the potteries which you actually come across in the early Harappan phase dating back to 3600 BC. They entirely different kind of vessel forms as well as the painting style. They show some of these features actually show resemblance with what you actually come across in the Gagar Saraswati system as well as in the Middle Indus. In addition to that, you also do come across, terracotta bangles, shell bangles, etc., which are all continue to be used during the urban phase as well. Now, apart from terracotta bangles, there are also stone beads as well. These are what you call the steatite beads. Steatite is in fact the softest of the material that we know. This has been actually kind of used to make many different kinds of beads, especially these tiny micro beads. What you actually see, these are the micro beads, and where my cursor moves, this is the human hair. So you can actually see the size of the bead is just a millimeter, and the diameter of the bead is just that is known as micro beads, steatite micro beads. And then you can barely string using a very thin hair. So how did the Harappans actually make it is it's still a kind of mystery, but then they were actually producing them in literally hundreds of thousands. In fact, you come across a large number of these microbeads, steatite microbeads in most of the early Harappan sites as well as in the urban phase. So you see the continuity there. Apart from that, you also do come across many of these stone beads. The Harappans are actually known for their semi-precious stone beads, very exquisitely made. But you actually see the beginning of this bead production in the early Harappans, and these beads are of course very clumsily made if you compare it with the urban phase, the beads. But then what one can actually see is that attempts have been actually made to make the beads, and they were actually making beads. These are the drill bits, which were actually used for perforating these beads. So you do come across a continuity. That is what I want to actually kind of show you. And these are some of the beads you actually found in the early Harappan phase from Harappa. You can see it's very nice semi-precious carnelian beads, amazonite, lapis lazuli, along with the terracotta beads. So on the base of this, one can actually kind of presume there would have been some kind of social stratification already prevalent during the early Harappan times. This is hypothetical position. It is not very easy to kind of prove it for certain. So you have steatite, agate, lapis, amazonite, and jasper finished beads, and also the byproducts or the waste materials of their production, indicating these artifacts, these beads were actually made locally at the site. And the raw material for these beads were actually coming from most of them coming from Gujarat, and also from a few of them from Rajasthan. So what does that actually indicate? So even in the early Harappan times, these regions were certainly interacting in a limited fashion in any case. But more interesting is the Indus script. You know that the Indus civilization is known for its script. Unfortunately, it has not been read yet. But you actually come across the early stages, the beginning stages of this script in the early Harappan, in the graffitis, which you actually come across on pottery, as well as sometimes on other materials. So some of them, many of these are just potter's marks, which symbols which people actually used to communicate. One does not know what they were actually communicating, but some of them were actually kind of pre-runner to the letter in the script, as you can actually see it in here. So you do come across a lot of similarities in some of the graffiti, the marks which you actually see in the letter in the script. So once again you can see the continuity over there. So as I mentioned earlier, you also do actually come across these seals, which are cut on ivory, bone, as well as steatite, and sometimes terracotta. But none of them did have an inscription. What do they have is mostly geometrical forms like what you see it in here. This is very commonly found in many of the early Harappan sites, like at Ramanderi it is there, at Harappa it is there, at Kodiji, and also when you come to the Gagar Saraswati system, you do come across similar kind of geometric pattern or seals with the geometric patterns, and also their impressions. So these are the features which, and of course, you have also this probably the use of bullock carts, actual evidence for the use of bullock carts, also coming from the early Harappan context. So this is from the the cart frames and the toy cart frames, as they were used like this. Okay, found from the early Harappan context, suggesting that the early Harappans most probably have been actually using this bullock carts, which is very commonly used in the urban phase. So what one can see is that the continuity in many areas, as far as the early Harappan, from the early Harappan to the urban phase of the Indus civilization. So if you look at the cultural traits, what are the shared common traits? The shared common traits among these different early Harappan assemblages is their subsistence activities were shared, in the sense that they were all based on cattle, sheep, goat domestication. These were the three animals actually domesticated extensively. That was the base of the subsistence, along with the cultivation of wheat, barley, and pulses, and probably rise in some places, especially in the Gagar Saraswati system and in Gujarat. And the use of copper is common in all these diverse early Harappan settlements. And, uh, and of course, regionally distinct ceramic traditions and fast wheel not very popular and distinct painted decoration. These are the differences you actually come across. This is what we have just enlisted till now. And the use of bichrome or different colors for painting were common in the early Harappan than in the urban Harappan. And differences are also shown in the terracotta figurines, which are found to be different from the classical Harappan or the urban Harappan. All right. Now, when we actually now come to the Gagar Saraswati system, exactly similar kind of pattern is found in the Gagar Saraswati system. There were several sites which actually shows is the early stages of the Indus civilization at the Gagar Saraswati system. The well-known ones, in fact, are Kalibangan, which most of you must be actually knowing, which is here, and then you have the Soti Siswal. These were the first site to be discovered by A. Ghosh. Kalibangan was extensively excavated, and these days, of late, we have excavations carried out at two important sites like Kunal and Birana, which actually gave a date going back much earlier than what has actually been thought of for the early Harappan. And in addition to that, you also come across different sets of potteries, as you have seen in the case of uh, Balochistan or in the Middle Indus. You do come across a different sets of pottery in addition to other kind of pottery, like what is generally described as you don't have to worry about the names, a different set of pottery, hakraware, or potteries which actually show a lot of incised decorations which are uncommon in the Indus Valley proper. And the dates are actually found to be slightly earlier. We'll come to that issue a little later. So Kunal is one of the early Harappan sites recently excavated, not very recently, I suppose recently re-excavated. It actually shows both use of mud bricks in the early Harappan context as well as extensive use of pits. These pits have been argued to be used for storage purpose as well as for sometimes for the dwelling purpose, at least in the earliest period stages of early Harappan. And in Birana, on the other hand, do have similar kinds of pits and mud bricks, but much more larger and extensive early Harappan habitat. What you see at the top, in fact, is the urban face, but what you see below is essentially all belonging to the early Harappan. And these are the kind of potteries you actually come across, which are once again quite different from what you have already seen. These are the incised potteries. You also see these incised potteries here. This is what the hakra where the outer surface, external surface is actually made rough by application of sand. That's the style being used to enhance the surface of the pottery. And these are some of the use of white pigment. Once again, you can actually see there are a lot of interesting patterns which you come across in pottery, which I don't want to actually bore you by showing. But you also have the seals, as you can actually very rare seal of an animal depiction, probably an antelope, and also these concentric circles on a steatite circular seal. And this is a pattern which you actually come across commonly shared not only in the Gagrasara system, but early Harappan sites at Ramanderi or sites in Harappa as well. So these are some of those seals cut on stone. And no writing, no Harappan script yet. In addition to that, you have all these terracotta bangles and beads, steatite beads, as well as terracotta animal figurines, different kinds of copper objects, and also, again, terracotta bull figurines, painted bull figurines from both Birana and Kunal in the early Harappan context. These are not Harappan. Harappan is much more vivid and much more standardized, but then this is from the early Harappan context. But then, what is more interesting is that the site Birana, in fact, have actually yielded a date which is going back to almost 6000 BC, as you can actually see This is only one site which actually shows a date earlier than 6000 BC for the what is known as the earliest period of Chalcolithic occupation. 6000 BC is very, very early. And then the next stage, what he called the early Harappan, is also early from 4500 to almost 6000 BC. That period is equivalent to what you actually come across from 3600 BC to 2600 BC. All right, and then the Harappan phase has been actually dated according to Rao, the excavator at Birana, from 3000 BC to 1900 BC. So obviously, Birana site actually shows very early date, which is incongruous. What one can see is that there is a mismatch between the material culture development that has been actually unearthed in the Gagar Saraswati system when you actually compare it with the Indus Valley. The dates are found to be very early. If the dates are actually right, one has to actually reassess this date to see whether it's right or wrong. What is more interesting is that the sequence is based on a series of date only from Birana excavation. No other site has actually shown such an early date. Kunal actually shows a date around 3300 BC, which is compatible with the early Harappan dates you come across in the entire Indus Valley. Um, no concrete evidence of Neolithic. See, in the Indus Valley, you do actually come across a very strong Neolithic substratum at Mehergar or at Kiligul Muhammad or at Sarai Kola. It's Neolithic sites which are distributed in the Middle Indus, also in the northern part of Punjab. You do come that going back to almost 7500 BC to almost 3000 BC. You do come across several Neolithic settlements in that region. But in the Gagar system, there are no Neolithic settlements. There are not even no hunter-gatherer settlements evidence in the Gagar system. The early human occupation in many of these sites actually start with the Chalcolithic. Okay, so that is an unnatural situation. So no concrete evidence of Neolithic substratum to the Chalcolithic early Harappan tradition found in the Gagar system. There is something not agreeing with the cultural sequence which we come across in the other places when we actually compare it with what you see at Gagar system. There is no clear evidence of indigenous agricultural life so far from this region. So there are only two possibilities. One is that they must have been actually coming from somewhere else and settling down as with the Chalcolithic as the Chalcolithic agricultural pastoral population, and the only place they can come from is from the Middle Indus, from Mehergar. That is the only site in India which is dated to around 7000 or 6000 BC for the Neolithic. Not even the Chalcolithic. Chalcolithic, their start are somewhere around 4000 BC to 3800 BC, not earlier than that. So obviously, the use of copper in the Birana is showing very early date. There is something not correct with the date, or with the archaeology. It's a challenge for an archaeology. We're actually missing something. The nature of Chalcolithic pre-Harappan habitation is doubtful, and there is a urgent need to reassess the dates. So there is some mismatch here. You have to actually remember that. This is in the news and newspaper in the last few years. Now we come to the last region is in the Gujarat region. So Gujarat, like what you have seen in the Indus Valley or the Gagar system, Gujarat also show the evidence of early Harappan settlement going back to 3600 BC. As my cursor move, you can see the most of the evidence actually come from the northern part of Gujarat as well as from the coastal regions of Saurashtra. Both these places, it has been dated to 3600 BC, and slightly later in time is in the Junagadh coast, that is around 3300 or 3000 BC. So, in other words, while early Chalcolithic agro-pastoral settlements were actually flourishing in the Indus Valley proper. Even in Gujarat, similar kind of agro-pastoral life was actually flourishing in many parts, especially in northern part of Gujarat as well as in Saurashtra. So I will just very quickly go through this. These are the two sites which actually shows this evidence of this, the early Harappan cultural remains or early Chalcolithic culture, indigenous regional Chalcolithic remains in Gujarat. This is known as Anarda tradition primarily because Anarda is the traditional name of North Gujarat, and these are actually first discovered and found to be more widely spread in North Gujarat. That is the reason this Chalcolithic remains is actually the early Chalcolithic remain going back to 3600 BC is named as Anartha tradition. So these are the kind of potteries you actually see the use of white painting, different sets of pottery, lot of different kinds of bowls here. Okay, and then this is actually also tested by the use of copper, and you also have the use of stone implements, use of terracotta pieces. Did not include the size of that. Is actually would have taken more time. And then when you come to Saurashtra coast, what you have this, what is generally described as the pre-Prabhas assemblages. A lot of these corrugated vessels, both the gray ware or the black ware as well as the red ware, and also black and red ware, which are all quite unique in this region. Dating back to almost, and they are all handmade pottery, not wheel-made pottery, very, very clumsy, crude-looking pottery. And then what is common here once again is the use of copper, stone as the stone blades as a lithic material for various activities, beads, beads of shell, beads of terracotta, and they are all depending once again on domesticated cattle, sheep, and goat, and cultivation of not wheat and barley but millets. So in Gujarat, what happens? It is in the semi-arid region. So wheat and barley cannot be easily cultivated. It does not grow very healthy here. So the indigenous crops like the small millets, there are six different indigenous millets which are found in Gujarat. These were the ones which were exploited by the early Harappan. These were the ones which were exploited by the Mesolithic hunters and gatherers, those who preceded the early Harappans, and that exploitation actually continued by the early Harappans. Okay, now next slide. You also do come across interaction of this North Gujarat and Kutch region with the Indus Valley, especially the southern part of Sindh. And that has been actually found in the form of ceramic assemblages like these, where my cursor moves, which are very similar to the kind of potteries which are reported from Amri and Kotiji and also from Balochistan. What does it actually suggest? It actually suggests the Gujarat region had, because of the geographical proximity, had interaction with the adjoining the Sindh region, and the site which actually shows this interaction is a site which is actually located in the North Gujarat, very close to the run of Kutch, known as Datrana, which has been actually radiocarbon dated to 3300 BC to 2800 BC. So almost 600 years or 700 years earlier than the beginning of the urban phase of Indus civilization. You come across they're making actually lot of very clumsy beads on carnelian, and you can actually see the drill bits being the kind of drill bits they actually use for perforating these beads. So the production of early Harappan beads, especially the carnelian beads, are very, very rare in the early Harappan context. There are only very few sites which actually have yielded these carnelian beads. One is Datrana, which is located here, and the other one, in fact, is Ganeshwar, that is in Rajasthan, and then the third one is Kunal, and the fourth one is Harappa. So what you can actually see is that they are actually, these sites are actually separated by literally hundreds of kilometers. But at the same time, you actually the similar kind of technology and similar kind of material being actually used for the production of these beads. So once again, indicating the kind of interaction, inter-regional interaction that existed as early as 3000 BC or 3600 BC. Now, there is also another interesting aspect of the early Harappan assemblages or early Harappan occupation in Gujarat, that is in the form of burials. So there are very few early Harappan burials have actually been reported in the Indus Valley. So you have early Harappan burials which are actually reported from Rakigadi. Early Harappan burials have been also reported from Kalibangan. Then you have early Harappan burials reported from Nal. And early Harappan burials were reported from Harappa. Mohenjo-daro had no burials. But when we come to Gujarat, you have several early Harappan burials. You have 2 or 3 sites in North Gujarat, all showing early Harappan kind of burials. And then you have burials which are actually found at Surkotada, that is in Kutch, and then further Dhaneti, also in Kutch, early Harappan burials, and also here, Juni Katya. All these sites are very recently excavated in the 2016, and some of the sites excavation still going on. All right. And these have actually these are the kind of burials, early Harappan burials you actually come across with the skeletons and also without skeletons, just symbolic burials. Um, yeah, that is where these burials are actually located. You can see this is the burial. This is Surkotada. That is Dhaneti. That is Unikatia. There are several burials. These are the excavated burials. I'll show you some slides. So some of these burials and stop. This is one of the sites which we have excavated, early Harappan burial site, which we have excavated, Dhaneti. Dhaneti is an interesting site because this is a cemetery. Something around about 4.5 hectares in size, and 46 graves could actually be identified on the basis of surface indication. Could be more, but no actual habitational site was found in the near vicinity. We have actually kind of thoroughly kind of combed the area all around in 10 to 15 kilometer radius. There are no real early Harappan site in anywhere in the vicinity. So that is an enigma, in fact, and it is not uncommon. Even at Nal in Pakistan, it is actually known through the burials, not through the habitation site. So these are the kind of, there are different styles of burials. You have very what is known as extended burials having skeletons as you see it in here, and these are generally interned with a number of potteries. The number of pottery, the vessels actually vary from just 2 in one burial to something around about 54 burials in one. So these are extensive burials. The length of these burials could actually be 3 to 4 meters. The longest one is around 5 meters, and it is actually kind of covered by the capstones, large sandstone slabs. And these architectural features, like this one, as you can see, this has got a burial pit covered with slabs, and it is actually marked by a ring, stone ring. By keeping these rubbles, made a ring around it, so that most probably someone else coming to bury, they will be cautious that they will not actually encroach upon and disturb the already buried grave. But then the important thing is that the megalithic burials of later, in peninsular India, have very similar architectural feature. So one is not saying that they are similar. Okay, I think I will wait. Oh, no. Okay, so this is how in the burials, these are all early Harappan pottery. I'm not going into details. So you do come across sometimes pottery within pottery, a lot of interesting features. All of them. The common thing is that they all are of early Harappan. And then in addition to this pottery, you also come across these shell bangles, shell ornaments. These are the only kind of ornaments found in those burials. We have excavated something around 12 burials. None of them contained any beads of stone beads, but many of them did have these shell bangles. So you have this one burial having 24 burial. See the skeletal or the bone, in fact, has actually been disintegrated completely. Very difficult to figure out because completely gone. What what is remaining is only the shell bangles which was originally worn by the person. So you can actually see there's a 24, we could actually collect 24 such shell bangles. This was almost in powdery situation. We had to actually take extra care to conserve them and preserve them. And then it was actually kind of photographed. Okay, a similar kind of burial has been actually found from further north of Datrana, the Thaneti from Junakatia. This has been a site which has been excavated by Kerala University, which has been in the newspaper a week back. They did actually come across several similar kind of burials from Junakatia and other sites. That the excavation is still going on. Okay. Now, this is a comparative chart of the early Harappan, which you actually have from Gagar Saraswati system, the Indus Valley, and Gujarat. What you can actually see is that the early Harappan cultural as well as the chronological context of Gujarat and Indus are almost very similar, dating back from 3600 BC to 2600 BC. Whereas in the case of Gagar system, only one site, that is Birana, actually shows much early beginning of the early Harappan. As I said, there are issues about there is a mismatch in the cultural development and the chronology suggested by the excavator. So I think that would actually be the last slide. I have tried to kind of put a lot of information regarding the early Harappan from different regions. To a lot of points which I had to actually escape. So if you have any, I am sure you will have a lot of questions or the doubts. You can if you have, please do ask.
Thank you so
Thanks
much,
for
sir,
your
for this
patient
wonderful
listening.
lecture. So I request all the participants to please use the raise hand option. So raise your hand and then I'll take all the questions one by one. Meanwhile, I have a question on chat. So I'm reading the question for you, sir.
Yeah. Can I unshare the, or let it be? Let it
Yeah,
be. Okay.
sure, sir. Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Stop sharing. Okay.
Yeah. So the first question that we have is, what is the function of the seals and what are they used for?
What is the function of the seals? That is an interesting question. I suppose it is very difficult to give a very satisfactory answer to this. It has been suggested that it must have been actually used for the trade and commerce activities carried out by the Harappans in order to authenticate the consignments which are actually taken from one place to the other. But there are lot of issues regarding that. Many of these seals and sealings, sealings are actually found on terracotta, right? So and they are burned. So how did these seals actually got burned is very difficult to explain. It is obvious that apart from they being used for the trade activities, it must have been used as an item of prestige, as an item that helped them to recognize certain symbols and certain, I mean, socially relevant symbols, etc. That is what one actually believes. Yeah, it could actually have some other religious context as well. Their use may have some religious value as well. That is why it is said it is very difficult to give a satisfactory answer to this. The use of seals. If you ask me how was their cut and all that thing, one is able to answer. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. The next question we have from Aninde. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir, for the lecture.
Right.
Sir, my question is that from the size of the burials or from the art, different art things that we have got across these three regions, do
Yeah.
we see evidence of class difference across these three regions? First, question number one. And question number two, if yes, then does this class difference exist in all the three regions or does it prevalent more in one region and not in other regions or something like that?
First of all, different regions. The burials are actually found distributed. I mean, there would ideally there will be burials in all regions. We haven't actually come across evidence of those burials from all the regions. We have evidence of burials from Kutch and North Gujarat, a large number of them. You have, as I said, a few from the Middle Indus, like at Nal and other sites. As you go up, you have burials, early Harappan burials from Harappa. And then you have early Harappan burials, which are actually from Kalibangan. So, how do you actually distinguish social stratification or social position, hierarchical position in the burial context? Generally, the criteria used is the quality of the materials which are found interned along with the dead in the burial pit. So the number of potteries most probably might indicate the burial status. The quality of like the beads or other ornaments which are actually found interned, that will essentially indicate the social status. So you do come across such variations in the burials. Probably that might indicate the status of the person who was buried in the. This once again it is hypothetical. You know, it is very difficult to actually kind of confidently say it is essentially suggests that. But then that is what we actually ethnographically observe. The social status is actually reflected in the burial goods if they are actually burial goods which are interned along with the dead. The second question, if yes, the second question, what was the second question? Hello.
Second question was that if the difference exists
Hmm.
in terms of class, was it prevalent in all the three regions or was it prevalent in only one or two regions?
I suppose inequality among individuals or humans in the society is the reality, and that will actually exist in all regions. I mean, the question is in archaeologically is how well it is actually reflected and how well one is able to read it correctly. That is the issue. So archaeologically, it's very difficult to actually read those kind of differences. From the material culture. You can, as I said, in the burials, it is easier because, variations or the quality of materials in turn will help you understand the social status. But since they are not found in all the sites, it is very difficult to kind of say that, it is there in those sites as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question we have from Ashwari ji. So you can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, hello. Hello,
Yeah.
sir.
Hello.
Thank you for the beautiful lecture. For me, it was a real treat because I professionally am a graphic designer and I'm an artist also. And I have had the honor of designing a few museums. And one of the recent ones that I designed is a Parsi museum in Bombay. And we have a lot of ceramic pottery and necklaces and jewelry and things like that in the museum. So one of the slides that you had, it had a particular pottery which is more of white and black kind of color
Hmm.
scheme.
Yeah.
And it had a very typical symbol, which I have seen a lot in the pottery that we have in our conservation lab in this museum that I designed. So obviously, Parsis come from Iran, and Iran is very close by to Balochistan. I mean, they migrated through Pakistan into India when they came via road. So I wanted to understand from you how did they make the pigmented colors? Is it very similar to how the colors were made in the Europe, like the pigments that they use to color the glaze of the pottery or whatever it is? That is one question, because it's very similar. the
Mhm.
colors that I see in the pottery that you have showed, and what we have in our museum, very, very similar. So is it the soil that was used for, say, the brown ones, and if it is black and white, what is being used? That is a very interesting
Okay.
uh, topic for me. That is question number one. And the second question was to do with the necklace that you showed. There
Yeah.
was one necklace which was it was stringed, but it was not, the string was not complete. It was broken.
Okay.
It was the first necklace that you showed, and in that there was one bead which was lapis lazuli, and the others were more grayish kind of stones.
Yeah.
So we, even in our this, we have a beaded necklace which is about say 3,500 years old. But when they found that particular necklace, it was completely intact. As in
Mhm.
there are a lot of colored beads in the necklace, and the uh, thread was not broken. Okay, it was completely intact, and it's very old. So I'm just wanting to understand the um the regions are very close by. So why is it that one beaded necklace survives completely intact, and another one breaks? Is it because of the thread that has been used, or what
So
could
this
it be?
one, the beads and necklaces you are talking about is from which region, which you are actually, I mean, what I have
That is
known, I know.
from Susa.
So,
The
so this is, I mean, these are antique beads. And antique beads.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There are, as I said, in the Indo-Iranian borderlands, where this, especially the gray ware, which you are actually, is known as Face Muhammad gray ware. It is a gray ware with those kind of stepped kind of decorations, which I suppose you are referring to, kind of, you know, step, what is known as step decoration. Those features, those painted patterns are very commonly found in the sides on either side of the border. In the Iranian side, like Susa and Tapeyahia
Hmm.
and all those sides, and also the sides in the Kotha Valley, like Damsadat and Jira, all those sides. No, the gray and red color of the pottery is essentially because of the way it is actually fired. In an open fire, when enough
Hmm.
supply of oxygen is in the kiln, it turns into red because clay essentially contains iron, and in the presence of oxygen, iron turned into iron oxide and become red. That is how the red color, the pottery gets red color. If you enclose the kiln, that it means you stop the free supply of air into the kiln. It creates an and reducing atmosphere, which means the iron present in the clay will actually did not get enough oxygen, then they turn into magnetic oxide of iron, which is black in color. So that therefore the clay turns into gray or dark colored black. So if the completely no air, it turns into pitch black. So if there is slight supply of air, it turns into different shades of black, like gray, etc. So those shades are achieved by those kind of firing. But then the pigments essentially because of the once again presence of different mineral oxide. Most of the time iron oxides, like
Okay.
red ochre turns into in the atmosphere turns into bright red or different hues of red, etc. So for the black, most of the times it is the magnetic manganese dioxide, which is actually mixed with other minerals, turns into black, not the reducing atmosphere. Because in the reducing atmosphere, everything will turn into black. Okay. And for the white and all those kind of different colors, they do actually use different mineral oxides. Regarding this strings, which is actually being used and it's found in the excavation. So in if one is actually talking about beads which actually coming from the Indus Valley context or from Susa itself, which is slightly later in time. But still they are actually thousands of years old, right? And then
Yeah.
none of the organic material which was actually used for stringing would remain intact. Even the metal, even if they used copper wires, that will not, because they are thin, that will not remain. They will all get corroded and gone.
Mm-hmm.
What you generally see is a pat. If it's stringed and the necklace is actually kind of fell into disuse, and then you actually kind of the deposit actually preserve the pattern. The string, the string will go away. The string what you saw is actually we put the string. It's the modern string which is actually being used.
Okay. Okay.
It is not the original. In no contest, the original strings are very, very rare. Hardly anywhere the original strings were actually found. So the string what you have is not the original one. Nowhere the original strings were actually reported. It is a pattern which actually helps you to imagine that these were originally stringed.
Okay.
Even when you can imagine if it is gold, it will remain. Gold will never get corroded. Then it will remain. But then whoever actually used gold, one does not really know. Copper probably must have been used, but then they will all get corroded and go away. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Right. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. We have next question from Viteji. Viteji, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. And I have a couple of questions. I was just wondering, like when we are talking about Chalcolithic period and all, is there any uh, like transference of pottery when we see the pottery from Mesopotamia, or like we were talking about the Iranian border and all that? Is there any similarity in the pottery or transfer of knowledge which we could see? And also, where were they sourcing like copper from? And even we can see carnelian beads also coming from Afghanistan. So were there any indication of trade which was happening at that time? And
For sure, there are indications of trade that has been actually happening, not in the early Harappan context. These were actually found. Most of these, what I mean to say is that the evidence of interaction between different regions within the Indus Valley, that is what I have actually tried to illustrate through the similarities of the material remains you actually come across and the continuity, right? But then with the Mesopotamia, Afghanistan, that region, that is when the lapis lazuli was actually coming from. Copper was actually coming from in the local regions in the Gagrasara system, mostly from the Aravalli Hills, and from the for the early Harappans in the Indus Valley, in the Chagi Hills in Balochistan. But then there is also evidence of copper being most probably coming from Oman, but very little evidence. But that is in the urban phase. That is during the 2600 BC and later. With the Mesopotamia, you have evidence of the Harappan interaction going back, to 2600 BC onwards, not earlier to 2600 BC. You have seals, Harappan seals which are found, Harappan beads which are found from the Mesopotamian sites. There are reference in the literature about the ships from Meluha bringing several different kinds of trade objects, including beads, birds, even wood, and then I suppose in some cases even toys and monkeys. All these things are actually referred in the cuneiform literature. The term they use to describe Indus Valley is Meluha.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like we saw so many beads, and of course, strung in in different patterns. Do we have any pottery or any other visual materials where they are depicted, like a paint
What? The beads are
the
depicted?
beads, on a, like we have mother goddess figurines and all that. So do we have those kind of decorations also, like how they used it?
I mean, in some of the, the early Harappan mother goddess figurines, you actually do come across, the ornaments which are actually worn around the neck. They're although very rare, and there's also kind of a dress tunic which is
Yeah.
actually worn there, especially when Ramanderi. There is, upper garment as well as a tunic. Sorry, with some patterns which are actually kind of painted. But there is no indication. I mean, when you come to the urban Harappan, urban phase, the Indus civilization, what you do actually come across. What do you come across? The mother goddess figurine with the necklaces and then arm ornaments, etc., depicted in terracotta figurines. There are no on pottery. There are no paintings of human figures. First of all, the depiction of human figures in the Harappan context are extremely rare, very rare. There
Mhm.
are a few human figure depictions from Saurashtra, that is in the urban Harappan context, Sarat Harappan, where you actually come across a human figure with a long hair and a kind of loin cloth, etc. But then human figures are depicted on the seals.
Okay.
And then in that you actually people are actually depicted wearing bangles. Beads, I don't exactly remember. There are shown wearing bangles and necklaces probably. And yeah, these are actually seen on the seal
Yeah.
depictions, yeah. But not on painted designs on pottery, no. Except the one from Padri where human figures are depicted, but then no beads or ornaments are actually seen depicted on them. There are depiction of cloth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And one thing fascinating what you mentioned was like in the early Harappan, this pottery and all, there were many colors
Yeah,
used,
yeah,
other,
different colors. Yeah.
which kind of tapered down in the later period, or during the urban period. Is there
Yeah.
any reason for that? Like when probably from hand built to the machine, when that came in, that this system they had developed about decorating it, that went down. Is there any reason for that?
It's anyone's speculation. But then primarily what happens that you actually come across in the early Harappan stage, that is when you have a canvas, and the new canvas is just actually available to, for the first time, available to these population. And they actually kind of started kind of expressing themselves in different regions. And then the interaction between different regions between limited and hesitant, so that actually helped them to create an individuality of their own. But when it comes to the urban phase, what actually happened is that the interaction actually became much more intense, and there is always a tendency to kind of standardization. And in that process, most probably the earlier sentiments with which they actually kind of vividly painting that potteries, etc., actually become lesser and lesser. And most probably the urban phase probably have provided new avenues wherein they can actually express their artistic or aesthetic sensibilities, which we do not know much. So
Okay.
this is all. These are all the
Speculation.
different ways one can actually think of why there was, as you said, there was a lessening or a tapering of this. The vivid and very
Yeah.
nice paintings features, which paintings you actually come across ceramics. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm sure there will be many more questions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. I think, are we? Hello? Am
Yes,
I
sir,
on?
yes, sir, we can hear you. We have a couple of hands raised. Uh,
Okay.
Mandira ji, why don't you go first, and Shubhangi second on our chat, so she can go second.
Thank you for this lecture. I
Okay.
was wondering how much we know about the people of these different regions. I mean, with their social organizations, were they in a family? There was obviously a hierarchy, they had fortifications, so they must have had some people guarding them. But was it more a communal life? Was it a family life in this hierarchy? I mean, how did they live?
A lot of interesting questions about yeah, obviously there certainly was a family, there was a society which was actually kind of very well organized, without which they can actually kind of move forward. And settlements actually shows how they actually kind of build those living structures, and then how they clustered together and they were actually protected. And the concept about protecting their settlements actually started emerging at this period. As you can actually see at Ramanderi and Kalibangan, you come across rudimentary features of this very early stages of fortification. And that becomes a norm in the urban phase after almost 1,000 years later. Almost all of the urban Indus like Mohenjo-daro or Harappa were extremely well protected by very thick wall. In some cases, these walls were actually unreasonably thick and large and humongous. You know, for example, at Dholavira, the citadel was protected by a stone wall which is 18 meters in thickness, solid wall, and it actually kind of covered less than a hectare area, less than a hectare. So, so that become a kind of fixation for the Harappans, at least in the urban phase. So, apart from a functional value, these fortifications also most probably had some symbolic value, especially during the urban phase, wherein they actually seen it as as a symbol of their status or authority also, which means that, and then building the such fortification walls essentially involved lot of investment of energies and resources, and which need to be channelized. That certainly indicate there was the kind of commanding authority that kind of taken care of planning those settlements and then executing the work. And how was this authority kind of mandated, one does not really know whether it was hereditary or it was kind of selected among from the equal. All those things are difficult to answer through material culture. What one knows is that these kind of patterns and these kind of features can come up only when there was a commanding authority that can actually get things done. Um, so, and then you also see in the early stages, all these craft activities, whether it is bead production or metalworking or pottery production, they were all slowly and steadily getting standardized, which means that there were the craftsmen, the skilled craftsmen, etc., were slowly and steadily emerging from a rudimentary, when a primitive, an early stage to a much more complex stage. And that complex stage is reached during the urban phase. That is the reason we call this early Chalcolithic phase as the early antecedent stages of the Harappan civilization or the Indus civilization. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mandira ji. Shubhangi, please go ahead with your question.
Sir, so I have two little questions. The first one being, did we find any evidence for material culture other than pots and beads, say textiles? And
Textile.
yeah.
Yeah.
And my second question is that did we find any of the tools that perhaps might have been used for incisions or carvings on these like pots that you showed us?
Okay. As far as the textiles are concerned, as you know, we are talking about a period going back to almost 4,000 years, or almost 5,000 years from today, or 3,600 BC is around 5,600 years from today, right? So it is unreasonable to imagine that textiles, whichever form it is, whether it is made of cotton, wool, or linen, would actually survive all those years. So practically no, except from one site in the urban phase, from which is at Farmana, that is in Haryana. They did actually come across some jute, by chance survived. I mean, whether it is real, its integrity to the context is it's a big question mark. But anyway, so but then what happens is that we do have these textile impressions on pottery, which are actually found from several sites, and most of them are actually coming from if I remember correctly, from the urban sites, urban phase, 2600 BC and later, not from the early Harappan context. So you have at least from those impressions which are found on pottery, but these are by chance, this is not by design. The impression of textile and pottery is by chance. When the pottery was where some textile actually happened to be wrapped around it, and then that left behind the impression, and they are actually found by chance. And then when you actually study them, several such sets are found. Some of them are actually from Gujarat, some from Kalibangan, some from two sides from Gujarat, and a few from Rakigari as well. So it indicates that the cotton was used, wool was used, and flax was also used. Flax yarns were also used for making textiles. And textile impressions were also found from copper implements and knives. What happened was that the working edge of the copper implements like knives and axes were actually kind of protected by wrapping it with the cloth. And they got corroded. And when they got corroded, they left behind the impression on it. So when we actually kind of took it under the microscope, we could actually see the textile impression, what is generally known as the polymorphs of the pseudomorphs, not polymorphs, sorry, pseudomorph of the textile on this corroded part of the copper implements. So these are the two different contexts. You actually come across direct evidence, let's say indirect evidence of textile being used by the Harappans. So one would imagine that this was a tradition most probably existed from the early Harappan times onwards. Why would we say that? We have this terracotta female figurines or human figurines which actually were shown by wearing clothes, the upper garment as well as the skirt or a tunic with a nice painted patterns like checks or crosses, etc., suggesting that some patterns also would have been woven while actually the textiles were actually made during the early Harappan times onwards. Yes.
That's very interesting, sir. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And what about the tools, like the second question that
Oh
I
yeah,
want?
the tools, yes. Weaving tools have been actually found. It's like most of them are actually the bone implements, which were actually used for weaving purpose in the weaving knives, weaving needles, etc. But for the incised decorations on pottery, most of them would have been actually, even today, the potters actually use wooden pieces or wooden tools because you don't need any other material for incised. For making incised decoration. So that would not have actually survived. So one does not really know. I mean, even some of the metal needles or some of the stone blades also must have been actually used for incised decoration. But then most of the times, if you go by the today's practice, the potters often use different kinds of wooden implements for the kind of decorations, especially dealing with incisions, are needed. Yeah.
So much, sir. Thoroughly enjoying this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shubhangi. Thank you very much, sir. We realize that it's
Yes, yes.
10:45. So, in
Oh,
the interest of time, we'll take one last question. The
yeah,
team also had questions, sir, but we'll send them to you via email.
yeah.
Thank you very much, sir, for extending the time. So, Anamika ji had a question. Anamika ji, please go ahead and ask your question.
Uh, Thank you, sir, for the wonderful lecture and very detailed answers. My question actually continues from Shubhangi's question. I have a request if you could kindly share with us the research papers or the recommendation for the book for more related to material culture, which some of my peers have asked before, but specifically for textile related discovery.
Textile, this, see, as I said, that there are many, I suppose. The internet is actually flooded with hundreds of papers on Indus civilization, which you can easily find. Regarding textiles, as I said, there are very little research actually being done. I mean, of the different crafts which you actually come across in Indus Valley, I suppose one of the most important crafts was the textile production, because everyone needs clothes and clothes won't actually last for long. So you need to continuously produce textiles. But unfortunately, the kind of evidence which has survived is very, very little. As I said, you can count them on your fingertips. So because of that, there are very little studies on Harappan textiles. There are a few regarding the discoveries of threads and also textile impressions. I can actually share it with organizers.
Yes, sir, that would be wonderful. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I will
I
certainly
had more
share it.
questions. I'll probably send them across with the
Please do.
organizers. We are overshooting the time. Thank you so
Okay,
much,
please
sir.
do. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much, Anamika ji. And with that, we come to the end of this guest lecture by Professor Ajithprasad Potentavida. Thank you very much, sir, for your time, for,
Thank you.
for sharing such fascinating aspects. For example, we, even as students of history, think that Mehergarh only belongs to the Neolithic period, and we never try to find the connections that it would have with subsequent history. So thank you very much for showing us your research work and your field work, and then giving so much of your time to our questions. As Sir has very kindly allowed us, please share your questions with us in the group, and then we'll relay those questions to Sir and get back to you with answers. Thank you very much, Sir, and thank you very much, audience,
Thank
for
you.
joining.
Thank you. Thanks for your
Thank
patience.
you, Ajit sir. And I
I'll
hope
take the
that
good night.
we'll go on the Dholavira trip now. We have done the Lothal with you. So we hope that I'll join you for the Dholavira trip very soon.
Oh,
Ishan,
I will
uh,
certainly enjoy doing that. You will let me know when you people are going, and then I will try to join you people.
Ishan, we are also invited, I'm hoping.
Yes, for sure. Please come to our city, Baroda. We'll first have some khamri and some good food, and then we shall talk about history. So,
All right. So shall we
yes.
sign
Yes,
off?
sir.
Where?
Yes, sir.
How do I sign off?
Sir, just you'll see leave at the bottom of your